The best 2 wildflower years in Mount Diablo's recent history came right after the 2013 Morgan fire. Lots of visitors drove up the mountain to enjoy the show. Heath and his colleague Brian Peterson established 40 study sites in different kinds of habitat. At each site, they recorded what species were growing and how abundant they were. Here's what they saw in April 2014, amid the ashes and char at Muir Picnic area. You had to be a pretty good botanist to recognize the first tiny signs of life that spring, including coyote bush or baccharis, a nitrogen-fixing pea family plant called acmispon, and a plant that rarely appears in the absence of fire, whispering bells. Their aim was to document the rapidly changing mix of plants that would cloak the mountain over the next 3 springs. They called it a study of fleeting abundance. The first year, Heath and Brian found 17 species that were fire followers, or plants that germinate in response to the heat, smoke, ash, or char from a fire. The best-known followers around here are whispering bells and golden eardrops, which botanist Mary Barman had documented on the north side of the mountain after the 1977 fire. They both made a strong showing in early spring after the Morgan fire. But the most sought-after fire follower was the fire poppy, which didn't show up until May and hadn't been seen on the mountain for almost 40 years.
40 years for a living embryo to be in the ground and then perk up, grow, flower, set seed, and start that life cycle all over again is just a testament to life. It's truly amazing.
In 2014, the fire poppy showed up on one of the mountain's steepest, most remote slopes. But that didn't stop Heath or his 8-year-old son Joaquin from wanting to go see it.
I told him what fire followers are all about, and I told him if a fire on Mount Diablo doesn't happen again for another 40 years, you're going to be 48, and I might not be around to take you to see one. And he was like, I want to go see it.
Some other species had hidden even longer than that fire poppy. Kellogg's climbing snapdragon, for example, came back after 80 years. A plant in the pink family called sleepy catchfly hadn't been recorded in Contra Costa County for 125 years. In addition to the 17 fire followers, Heath and Brian found dozens of opportunists. Those are plants known to grow on the mountain in ordinary years, but they become bigger and more abundant in the extra space and nutrients provided by the fire. The California poppy, for example, shined brighter than ever. So did some plants that were considered rare before the fire, like Mount Diablo phacelia and Mount Diablo jewel flower. Among the most successful of the opportunistic plants were the geophytes, or earth plants. Geophytes store energy underground in bulbs, corms, tubers, rhizomes, or taproots. That gives them a boost under tough conditions such as fire or drought. Bulb plants like Fremont's star lily carpeted whole slopes that first spring, and the mountain's Mariposa lilies went wild, including the butterfly Mariposa. In year 2, vining plants such as wild cucumbers, clematis, and morning glories took center stage. They germinated in year 1 and grew big enough to dominate a year later. Out in Heath and Brian's study plots, the morning glories were so thick they called them trip vines.
The show, when they flowered that second year, was pretty remarkable. I mean, you could look up on the hillside, it was just like white. You really got a little bit of insight into what it might be like to be a pollinator or some kind of creature that likes those things. It would just be a landslide victory for you, you know? It'd be a good year.
By the 3rd year, things were heading back to normal. Here's what the progression looked like at Oak Knoll Trailhead. In the spring of 2014, whispering bells were everywhere. By the fall of that year, they had died back, and shrubs such as yerba santa and chamise were poking up. By the third spring, dominant chamise was back, and there was nary a whispering bell in sight. One of Heath's favorite places to see wildflowers is on the single-track North Peak Trail, starting at Devil's Elbow and heading out toward Prospector's Gap. The out-and-back distance is 2 miles, with about 500 feet of elevation loss going out and gain coming back. Hiking poles are recommended. Heath likes to come here.
Mainly just because of the plant diversity, and you can see tons of different stuff at different times of year. But I think one of the best parts is after you come down from the trailhead and the trail turns north a little bit, and then there's a short section of switchbacks. You can see a couple different types of larkspurs and tidy tips. And then you continue down and you go through the woods there a little bit, and then it opens up into this nice grotto where you'll see red larkspurs and the biggest onion on the mountain, Allium unifolium, which has just got this really soft and delicate pastel pink color. It's one of those scenes where you get there early enough and you just have to stand there and look and appreciate it. And hikers might say, "Excuse me," because you're blocking the trail, it's so narrow, but it's just that place where it's wet, it's floriferous, and you're almost near the top of the mountain, and it's like, wow, this is really a special place.
The best time to come is late March to early June, with the finest displays in April and May. In addition to the species Heath mentioned, look for California poppies, wind poppies, Brewer's rock crest, varicolored penstemon, and red ribbons. There's a steep downhill stretch right before you get to Prospector's Gap. Feel free to skip it and head back to the trailhead if you like. In our next segment, we'll examine a group of plants that tend to be underappreciated: shrubs.